Hello, this is Mary Corcoran. This video is used to introduce our Plagiarism Series, which will run for every Wednesday from January 7th through February 4th. So we're using this video to talk about what is plagiarism, why does it happen, and what can be done about it. Those topics will all be expanded in the rest of the series. So this video will cover the types of plagiarism that you might run into, the causes of plagiarism, how plagiarism should be considered as a shared responsibility, and a few best practices that will be expanded upon in the series that follows. Full disclosure, because I do not want to plagiarize, that the video content really is a summary of content found at two sources. One is the Council of Writing Program Administrators, and the other is the WID Studio at GW. Both the URL addresses are provided here, and they have a lot of information that's very valuable, so I encourage you to take a look. What is plagiarism? Plagiarism is a multifaceted, complex problem. But any definition of plagiarism has to be fairly simple in order to be helpful to students, faculty, and administrators. The definition used by the Council of Writing Program Administrators is shown on the slide, and it says, in an instructional setting, plagiarism occurs when a writer deliberately uses someone else's language, ideas, or other original material without acknowledging its source. I think many of our students would be surprised to find out that the definition of plagiarism goes beyond language and includes ideas or other original material. There are two types of plagiarism that have been identified in the literature. The two types are intentional and accidental plagiarism. Intentional plagiarism obviously is that the plagiarism is done knowingly and willfully, and that might include, say, downloading some available papers from the internet, and those are for sale and available, asking someone else to write a paper and then submitting it as your own, faking a citation that doesn't exist, or obviously not acknowledging the source of ideas or original material. So what causes intentional plagiarism? Students may actually fear failure or fear taking risks in their own work. And this is especially true in very high stakes situations where a student has to get a certain grade on a paper, and if they don't, they have terrible consequences, and so they may plagiarize for that reason. Students may have poor time management skills, or they may just plan poorly for the time and effort that's required for a research-based writing assignment. So they may believe that they have no choice but to plagiarize. Students may view the course, the assignment, or the conventions to be unimportant, or that the consequences of cheating are unimportant. Or teachers may present students with assignments that are so generic that students may believe that they're actually justified in looking for somewhat canned responses. And finally, instructors and institutions may fail to report cheating when it does occur, or may not enforce appropriate penalties. Students may also be victim to accidental plagiarism. And students are not really guilty of plagiarism when they try in good faith to acknowledge others' work, but fail to do so accurately or fully. These failures may be largely the result of failures in prior teaching and learning, or students may just simply lack the knowledge of and ability to use convention attribution. So when a student is accidentally plagiarism, it may be because the concepts underlying plagiarism are really based in Western conventions of copyright and property. What causes accidental plagiarism? International students may be particularly vulnerable to accidental plagiarism because they may not be familiar with or actually are confused by the idea of plagiarism. It's possible that in some students' minds, based on their cultural backgrounds, that using someone else's words is actually considered an honor. And they may not know what plagiarism is or how to avoid it, such as taking careful notes to make sure that you keep track of the sources, and they may not know what the citation rules are. Dealing with plagiarism requires that everyone take responsibility for the issue. And this is a shared responsibility by students, faculty, and the administration. Students must understand and use the academic conventions. Faculty need to design assignments that just go beyond reporting what's in the literature and actually require the students to use higher level cognitive skills such as analysis or critique. The administration needs to promote a culture of honesty and rigor and to pursue instances of plagiarism in ways that are equitable but firm. So we have a plagiarism series planned for our Lunch and Learn series that actually happens January 7th through February 4th, and it runs a little bit after 12 o'clock and ends a little bit before 1 o'clock. These are held in the Smart Lab at 2000 Penn. It's actually a three-part series. In part 1, we'll talk about designing assessments to minimize issues with plagiarism. And we'll start with writing-based assessments on January 7th and then go to test-based online assessments on January 14th. Part 2 has to do with educating students and faculty. So on January 21st, we'll talk about some of those gray areas of plagiarism, something that's less than obvious and may fall into a middle type of area between plagiarism and not plagiarism. And then part 3 will discuss detection and deterrence. So on January 28th, Tim Terpstra will talk about filing a claim with the Office of Academic Integrity. And on February 4th, we'll talk about Safe Assign and other technologies that will help with detection. So what are some best practices that we can talk about now prior to getting into the details of our series? The first best practice is to explain plagiarism and to develop very clear policies. Talk with students and remind them about the underlying implications of plagiarism. If students understand why plagiarism is an important thing to avoid, and why plagiarism is a case of academic dishonesty, then it's much more likely that they will not engage in plagiarism. Make sure that you include in your syllabus a policy for using sources and actually make an effort to discuss it in your course. The second best practice is to improve the design of assignments. Make sure that you use assignments that require the student to explore a subject in depth and not just report on a subject. Consider building topics as early as possible so that you can give the students time to explore their topics slowly, and you can help them to narrow their focus from broad ideas to specific research questions that will allow them an opportunity to use the literature and to get feedback about their use of the literature. Develop schedules for students that both allow them time to explore and to also support them as they work toward a defined topic. And then support them in each step of the research process. Students often have little experience in planning and conducting research, so that we really need to give students an opportunity to access our expertise in low-stakes writing assignments and then to build up to these higher-stakes writing assignments. Make sure that you help students attend to sources and use their materials appropriately. So ask them to draw on and document a variety of sources. Consider asking the students to show you their work, show you how they came to their conclusions, to show you their research strategy, and to actually discuss with the students how their sources will enable them to support their argument or to document their research. The more you get an opportunity to talk about their sources, the more you'll get an opportunity to really show them when they're actually using those sources correctly. Make sure that you distinguish between the misuse of sources and actual plagiarism. Misuse of sources may actually just be a matter of not understanding the particular style that is being required in the course, but actually making an attempt to cite the particular source. Plagiarism is knowingly not citing a source when you should be. And then finally, take appropriate disciplinary action. Pay attention to what the institutional guidelines are and make sure that you follow those guidelines and apply them equitably. So that's our introduction to plagiarism, and I hope to see you every Wednesday from January 7th through February 4th for our series. Thank you.